everyone, and welcome to ReadySetCyber, an ongoing deep dive into the issues and solutions in cybersecurity. I'm Rob Miller, Chief Revenue Officer for growing SaaS firms, and your host for today's show. As promised, we're here to face the elephant in the room, the one you saw in the intro, that big, scary, lumbering beast that frequents every boardroom, but that no one wants to talk about. And today, the elephant is CyberRisk. Most business leaders are focused on the company's bottom line and find the elephant too overwhelming, too technical, just another cost to consider. But what if ignoring the elephant was putting your bottom line at great risk? The more tiptoeing around it we do, the more expensive and the more disruptive it becomes. Just this year, the average cost of a data breach climbed to nearly $5 million. For some companies, a single cyber attack could mean devastating loss of trust, reputation, revenue, or worse, your entire business. So we've heard that upwards of 60% of small to mid-sized firms will fail within 6 months of a cyber attack. But what if that beast in the boardroom wasn't so scary after all? What if facing the elephant could actually help your bottom line? Today, I'm joined by a brave panel of experts. We'll tackle hard truths, talk real numbers, get practical, and cut through the noise and face the elephant together. Audience, we're grateful to have you here, and we want to hear from you. If you're joining us live, please type any questions or comments into the chat, and we'll address them in real time. If you're watching this recording, drop us a line in the comments section, and we'll be sure to get back to you at some point. All right, ready? Let's meet our panelists. First up, coming to us from Arkansas is Andy Runyon, Director of Strategic Alliances for UCOM, the cyber insurance marketplace, turning risk into revenue for MSPs, agents, and partners. Welcome, Andy.
Good to be here.
We also have Joshua Copeland. He comes to us from Shreveport, Louisiana. He is a CISO, cybersecurity subject matter expert, speaker, author, startup advisor, and cybersecurity NPO board member. He's also known as the unpopular opinion guy, speaking his mind on cyber issues. Be sure to pick up your copy of his new book. It's on the bookshelf right behind him, called Unpopular Opinion. Welcome, Joshua.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We also have Darren Mott from Huntsville, Alabama. Darren is a retired FBI special agent, aka the Cyber Guy, and co-founder and director of cyber operations at Five Eyes Limited. You'll also see him on national news programs. Hey, Darren.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, and last but not least, and this guy doesn't have a quote yet, or he doesn't have a nickname. We've got to come up with one. It's Heath Spencer, coming to us from Reno, Nevada. Heath is the CEO of Traitware, leader in phishing resistant or phish proof, passwordless multi-factor authentication, and single sign-on for the enterprise. Hi, Heath.
Hey, guys. Great to be here. Excited for today's conversation.
I'm glad you're all here. Let's jump in. So let's talk about the elephant. Let's define the elephant. Let's start with Heath. From a leadership perspective, what are we getting wrong? Why is something so huge being ignored by so many business leaders? Why do you think security is seen as just another cost, not as a driver of ROI?
Well, I think when it comes to cyber risk, a lot of leaders or a lot of business leaders, it appears invisible to them, and they think it's the responsibility of the services that they're hiring, right? So they sign up for email, they sign up for some CRM tool, they sign up for wherever, whatever other tools they're using their business is, and they think that by contracting out or using a SaaS solution that the security is being transferred to, the responsibility of whoever's providing them that service, when they need to take some ownership of it themselves. And in this world over the last couple decades, we've seen, it used to be businesses held some more of the data, and they're still out there that do this on what we would term as on-premise, right? They were responsible for it, but now they're like, oh, I farmed that out, or I contracted that out to the SaaS provider, the service provider that's hosting it for them in the cloud. And so I think there's this perception that they're not responsible for security, and then they think, well, it's an add-on feature that I got to pay for, and it's not helping me increase revenue, so I don't want to pay for it.
Understood. Anyone else want to jump in?
Well, right. I've been talking to victims and potential people to be targeted for 26 years now, part with the FBI and part post FBI, and two things always come up. we're too small. No one wants to target us. I don't think they have anything anyone would want. I mean, those are the same things. I say this almost every time I'm talking to somebody. Those are the two things that come up. And it's never happened to me. Why would I need it? I've never had an attack. Why do I need a CAT scan? Why do I need it?
Understood. This is like preventive medicine. Darren, actually keying off of that. So what is the real cost of avoiding the elephant? I mean, can you share a story or two from those 26 years of experience that will illustrate the real financial impacts?
Well, I'll give you the two most recent ones that are huge is M&S in the UK. They're basically a big supermarket chain over in the UK. They got hit with a ransomware attack 6 months ago. They're still fighting out from underneath it, and their market share has gone down $400 million. Last week or 2 weeks ago, Jaguar Land Rover hit with ransomware. $50 million a week they're dealing with trying to fix its problem. So those are two recent ones. I mean, I can go pick a week, find a target. I mean, you can't skip the news and not see somebody getting hit with. I mean, ransomware is the most sexy one, so the news always talks about it. But the bigger issue is business email compromise. Companies that are sending out wire transfers because they don't recognize that this is a risk because they don't know it. And they don't have policies and situations in place to be able to deal with it. So they're dealing with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars going out the door.
Got it. Andy, you're in the insurance business. Can we see some real numbers? Can we talk about real numbers?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, just to validate a couple of things that Darren said there. I mean, guys, our firm is on the other side of the fence. Everybody here comes from the cybersecurity perspective. We come from, you guys are mitigation. We're transference. We're on that other side of the fence. And talking about the we're too small. First of all, I live in a small town of about 30,000 people in Northeast Arkansas. You've got three Southerners on the call today, right? If our funeral home has been a victim of ransomware, right? Like, and it has, anybody can get hit. Literally anybody. If a small funeral home in Paragould, Arkansas, can get hit. But yeah, happy to share some stuff that we've pulled. A couple of things. I'm struggling to share my screen here, but we can get reports out here. There's a couple of reports that have come through. Liz, if we can go to.
I think she got it up.
Yeah, I think that's on me. I think I've got the the wrong one there. Let me see. I had the wrong slide. That was 100% on me. There's a couple of reports that have come out recently, some on an annual basis. NetD comes out on an annual basis. Sophos comes out on an annual basis. There we go. Sorry for the lack of execution there, guys. And then the Travelers report, right? On the insurance side, we look at both cybersecurity reports, financial reports from the insurance end, right? This Sophos report from 2024, if you want to look at putting actual numbers to it, it polled roughly 5,000 people in total, right? 5,000 businesses. And they asked those 5,000 businesses, had you had a claim or had you had an event? What was the average cost of that event? Now, Heath mentioned earlier that nationwide in 2025, average events over $5 million, not disputing that. For this study, for the Sophos study of small to medium-sized businesses, their cross-section, their average was right at like 2.7 million, right? Now, they asked, what was the average size of the event? 2.7 million. Did you have insurance and make a claim? And 3,800 people said that when they made their claim, they were not made whole by that claim, right? So you may wonder, like, why is the insurance guy jumping on here saying insurance doesn't work, right? Like, why in the world would the guy with the insurance background hop on and say, well, cyber insurance didn't make people whole? Guys, it is there's a combination of things going on right now. Number one, the average cost of breaches is a hockey stick right now, right? If you go back 3-4 years, there's been 150% increase in the average cost of a breach to an SMB, right? At the same time, small to medium-sized businesses don't understand cyber insurance very well. They don't have good education. Their agents don't understand cyber insurance very well, right? So what's happening is, and we'll talk mitigation today with the cybersecurity crowd, but when it comes time for transference and we say, hey, we've still got some overhanging risk here, we need to transfer that out to insurance, there's a massive gap between the business interruption, fines and penalties, the actual money that's going out the door, and an understanding at the SMB level of how much risk I need to transfer through insurance, right? And that's why this number here that we're showing, of those 3,800 people that said they weren't made whole by insurance, 63% simply did not know how much insurance to buy, so they underinsured themselves.
Right.
Yeah. So Andy, Darren made a comment on business email compromise, particularly focused at wire fraud, right? In transfers of those things. And I know you've seen some stats around just that. What would you say is like the biggest misconception or the elephant in the room for the SMB in regards to not understanding their exposure with money transfer?
Yeah, no, 100%. We had Mercy Comar on with us a week ago, and back to the we're too small. Objection. Do you have a bank account? Because if you have a bank account, you need cyber, right? Like that. What we're seeing.
Wouldn't that statement go just a step further? Do you have a bank account, and are you connected to the internet?
Yes. No. Yeah. 100%. Yes. Do you have a website? Yes.
And I'd love for Josh to speak to that one too. Of like, how many people well, are you connected to the internet? Well, then you're on the field of play, and like, how many people just don't understand that?
Yeah. And I don't want not to cut Josh off, and I'll let him speak here on this. But in the insurance industry specifically, we have seen a massive shift in claims. Not that ransomware, please do not hear that ransomware is not important. That's not what I'm saying. Ransomware made up the lion's share of claims in 2020 and 2021. But with the advent of AI, the language models, right? The death of what I call the Nigerian prince email, right? Those social engineering attacks led by phishing attempts, those type claims on financial fraud, invoice manipulation, they equal what we see in ransomware claims in insurance.
Interesting. So we're hearing about, we've heard millions of dollars going out the door. Firms are underinsured. Joshua, getting over to you, how do these breaches, reputation loss, customer trust actually impact long-term growth for businesses?
One of the important things to think about is that all these threat actors, whether they're doing business email compromise or ransomware, it's an extremely professional organization. They don't care how big you are. They're going on massive scale. If I target 1,000 SMBs and I'm ransoming them for $5,000, which is a SMB level money, that's still $50,000 for a couple minutes worth of work. So from that perspective, you have to look at it. Everyone's a target. And when you look at the second and third order effects, is breaches don't just cost money in your short term. They erode the trust in your brand equity that you've spent years building. It can be lost deals. It can be pulled partnerships. Customers quietly churning because you had a breach and now the end of your contract and they decide to go someplace else because they just don't trust you anymore. And it's harder to measure that than it is to measure a ransom payment. Ransom payment is very much a black and white. This is how much that's going to cost, but you don't necessarily are able to project out your losses based off of all those other things. And trust compounds just like interest. And to the other side of that, so does distrust. So once it's broken, you often can never fully return that level of trust. So that's why companies who take a ransomware or business email compromise see a long time to kind of recoup from that. So investments in your cybersecurity now and your growth is not just an investment against your insurance or your losses, but it's actually a huge investment in your business. And kind of flipping it a little bit, it's also an investment in gaining more business, because once you're able to document and prove that you have good cybersecurity practices, that opens the aperture of the businesses that you're able to sell your product to or sell your services to.
Right. As a third party, you are now more trustworthy, and we'll come to that topic maybe a little bit later in this conversation. But so let's talk a little bit about misalignment within the organization. I mean, Heath, we just heard actually the small businesses do need to worry, because a lot of small businesses being hit by ransomware attacks or fraud actually add up to a lot of money, and so they're still attractive to threat actors. But why is it important, or how can we simplify security for that small business who doesn't have an army of IT professionals, perhaps, and both from a product standpoint and how to communicate that and those complex risks, especially to people who are not technical?
Yeah, so the SMB space, again, as I started off the conversation, I think has this misperception that they can rely on whoever's providing their SaaS service, and I do want to point out a lot of the service providers are improving, but there's still a gap in where certain providers are charging a tax, let's say, for certain features that really should just be included because it's how they help get security, right? And so with that, obviously, Andy in what Yukon does is specifically focused on helping the managed service providers, which really are kind of that extended, if you're a small business and you don't have an IT background, you're relying on a friend of a family or a family member that because they know how to do certain things, that they're your network guy, right? You may want to consider looking at what managed service providers are nearby you, not just so much more for when your computer breaks and you need to get it fixed or whatever, but actually how do you configure and set up your environment, which today includes software as a service in the cloud. And it's a way to do that in a fractional cost, right? Because they are servicing multiple clients, that you can get the expertise from an MSP without having to hire a full-time employee to do that, right? At a fractional percentage. And that's one way to do it. Another way is to there's a gentleman that's always preaching about this, but the Center for Internet Security Controls is a free resource that has a map of tools and things that you can do as a small business that are free to go and do, and just take those steps and find those types of resources to start somewhere. And then being biased in what we do is, in today's world and predominant SaaS products, identity and how you secure that is a first place to start. And implement strong multi-factor authentication is a key component and will reduce your risk drastically just starting there. But start somewhere.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit about the quantification of this risk. I mean, how do you currently quantify cyber risk, and how can you leverage that information? So as some examples, does it inform setting aside budget for initiatives that you need to take on from an IT perspective, like implementing zero trust, or setting your levels of cyber insurance as we've indicated already, or maybe helping you introduce the rollout of new vendors, right? And understanding exactly how much more risk that introduces. I mean, Darren, maybe back to you. I'm curious to know, what practical steps can companies take to move security from a cost center to a business asset, and how do they drum up those numbers?
Well, I think the first thing they have to realize is that targets are coming at them from all different areas, right? If you're not in the cybersecurity space, like all of us are cybersecurity practitioners in some way, we're preaching to the converted here largely in this room, but it's the people that are not converted that we need to kind of talk to first. And the first part is understand who's targeting you. Like, who do you even, like in your business, who do you even know who's coming at you? We've talked about ransomware and business email compromise, right? Let's not forget the nation state actors. If you're a small organization within the defense industrial base, China, Russia are coming at you all day long. So that requires a different set of actions, perhaps, to try to ward off some of those attacks. And part of that is understanding that. We give an analogy in our business about, it's a soccer analogy, right? Most of my partners are in the UK, so we use soccer as the analogy, but they call it football, but think of it as, start off with defending your assets. So think of it as the defenders on a soccer team. They're there to stop the bad guys from getting in, because defense has to be right all the time. Offense only has to be right once. So find what are your defensive basics? Have you even done a risk analysis? Have you figured out what your risks are? Do you even know that? Start there. There's plenty of organizations that'll help you do that. There's things you can do on your own, like mentioned with CIS. There's the NIST controls. There's all sorts of controls you can look at to try to start running down that road. Do a vulnerability assessment, even know where your holes are. Find your holes. If you don't know where your holes are, your bad guys are going to find the holes and they're going to exploit those holes. I mean, there's a lot. I could go that deep into this, but start there. And then once you've got your defenses up, then figure out what are you going to do offensively. How are you going to put those things in place that make a bad guy say, well, these guys are too hard to get into. I'm going to go down the street to this guy who's not doing anything that I can get into. So at least try to get to that point, because you can invest this amount now over the course of however long. But again, what the average cost of a data breach, $5 million, right? That's what we said at the beginning. So that's right. If you invest $100,000 a year in cybersecurity, how long is that going to, what's the difference there? 100,000 versus 5 million one event. you can spend $100,000 for 50 years before you've reached the 5 million mark. So invest in that security up front, because the one attack that hits is going to cost a whole lot more at one time.
There's your ROI. Darren, I love the analogy to soccer. Both my boys have played soccer pretty seriously, and they just said to me last weekend they like playing offense, midfield or forward, because defense hurts.
Right. Yes.
So a perfect analogy. Josh, I want to hear some more from you about, how can proactive cybersecurity, along the lines of what Darren has said, open new markets, partnerships, or improve user experience? Like, how can we extend that ROI from just, I'm spending the right amount on cyber insurance and therefore I'm covered, to it actually is going to help me improve my business. I can turn this into, I can broadcast this in a sense to the world and help make my business thrive.
Yeah, so it comes to one of those things where, when you're the cyber professional in your organization, you have to go to your other leaders, your peer leaders, the C-suite folks, and talk to them about cyber risk in terms that they understand: financial exposure, operational downtime, brand impact. And brand impact is the one that we are often the worst at explaining, because it's outside of the scope of the bits and bytes that cyber normally deals with.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the one that it's a lever that you can really do a whole lot with. The more that we have a better cybersecurity posture, one, the lower that our cybersecurity insurance premiums are going to be, because there is a link between those two things. The more secure my organization is, the more safe that the insurance company feels that I'm not going to get breached, and you're a good investment. Andy will surely talk about that here in a little bit. But then it also comes down to, if you're a SOC 2 Type 2 organization, or you're an ISO 27001 certification organization, where you can go, look, this is where I've proven to outside auditors where I'm safe, I'm secure. If you're, to Darren's point, if you're in that defense industrial base, SaveMC just got fully approved, and it's going to affect not just the big prime contractors, but all the subcontractors are now going to have to invest money into that. And if you don't, you lose those opportunities. Same thing with state government. Most states now have some version of the FedRAMP program, whether they're using state ramp or a particular state branded flavor like TexRAMP. But it's all, how secure is your organization? And by doing those levels of attestation, increasing your program, it's a market differentiator, particularly if you're doing new things that not everyone's doing. So AI is the big buzzword in all things cybersecurity. And there's the NIST AI framework, risk management framework, and there's the ISO 42001 framework. If you can position your organization as one of the first adopters of that, you're not playing table stakes like a SOC 2 or a ISO 27001. You're doing something that's purely a differentiator between you and a peer. And that becomes a huge marketing ploy to say, not only are we doing what everyone else is doing to make sure that you're safe and secure, we're doing these additional things because this is what's new and what's going to actually affect the larger business. And if you do that early enough, that's a huge return on investment compared to waiting 5 years when it becomes table stakes.
So I got you mentioned, brand, and how important that is. However, and because I've run up against this, and so I'd love to hear from Darren and you, Josh, on this side of it. How do we help show the importance of that when, we go back to one of the first headline breaches that took place that the public was aware of was Target, right? So when Target got breached, et cetera, it took a brand hit for a little while, but did not go out of business. And I would argue that today is doing just fine. Most recently, we've had hotel chains like Caesars and MGM take a hit in personal data, and yet they survived. And I would argue that, they had a dip and then came back. And when other business leaders see that, they almost just look at it as a line item expense and think that that's less expensive than the upfront cost of trying to actually do better to protect people's data. And how do we get businesses to own responsibility without having to convince us as the end, people whose data was breached, to try to vote better with our dollar, as you were just saying, Josh, on the businesses that are taking it more seriously?
So I'll start first with, how big is your business? Can you afford to take that dip for,
Yeah.
a couple weeks or a couple months? Sure, if you're a Fortune, 500 company, you can absorb the dip in your stock for, a couple months, and there's an entire investment scheme
Yeah.
around
Dip.
buying the
Yeah.
dip on
Yeah.
on breaches.
Yeah.
But depending on which stat you look at, upwards of 50% of all SMBs that have a breach will shut down and shutter their doors within 6 months. And that's because they can't afford the dip that these big businesses can absorb. If you're a business, and even if you're on that larger side of the SMB, how much can you realistically take a hit on your revenue over a large period of time of several months? And for most businesses, it's not a terribly long period of time. They've got to have that revenue coming in. So it's a very different scenario from, the Fortune 100 companies compared to that SMB market. And
Agreed.
the SMB, the level to get to you, the level of effort that it takes to ransom you, and the level that they're going to charge you for ransom is significantly different than those big ones, because you're just an easier target.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all that. And I'll give you a different example. Again, it's a UK example. Sorry, it's kind of where I've been talking lately. There's a transport company or logistics company called Knights of Old. Been around 158 years. Had 700 trucks that traveled all over the London area. Hit with a ransomware attack. The ransom was only $1 million. 158-year-old company, no longer in business. Went out of business, couldn't afford it, took the hit. Here in the U.S., there was a medical conglomerate out in the Midwest, 6 medical facilities. And as most of us know, that medical facilities run on pretty small margins. Hit with a ransomware attack, had to close all 6. So there's a real life impact there, not just for the brand of that particular entity, but for the communities in which they served. So this goes beyond even just the brand of the company. It goes to the economic viability and downstream impacts to other people and individuals, especially when it comes to education and healthcare, because those are 2 areas that are just well underserved from a cybersecurity perspective. They don't invest in it. We had a school district here hit with ransomware. They rebuilt their system. They had 3 guys doing it. We had a company that come in and did a pen test. After they rebuilt their system, found 750 critical vulnerabilities on the network, got into all their domain controllers, 1,100 high level vulnerabilities. So it's certainly an issue.
Yeah. And Heath, that it kind of alludes to that whole idea of that you're not too small to get hit. You're just too small to make the news. Right. And
Correct.
The issue there is, I think societally, when we look at kind of the mental gymnastics of this, right, is I think as business owners, we see Target get hit, we see Equifax get hit, and those brands survive. And I think whether we want to admit it or not, in the back of our minds, they go, well, see, look, they had a ransomware event. I read about it. They're still around. My wife just went and spent $400 at Target this weekend. They're fine, and they have reached the maturity and the financial capacity to survive those things, right?
Yep.
Now, what you don't see on the back end of that is they probably had to lay some folks off. They may have lost some stock price, right? There may have been some shifting, but we're not exposed to all that, right? And then what is really happening on Main Street is the $100 million manufacturer that employs 50 people gets hit, and they're closing doors and laying people off, and it doesn't make the national news, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of gap between, what I think perception of what happens with these breaches and the potential to survive them at the large company level, because that's what we ingest, right? Versus what happens on Main Street when a small business is hit.
All right. I think you've already answered this question through the examples you all have just given, but what's the first thing you'd say to a business owner, let's say a small business or mid-sized business owner who's skeptical about investing in cybersecurity or cyber insurance?
If I were to tell you a year from now, you'll be paying $5 million for a data breach, but it's only going to cost you $100,000 to put preventative measures in place now, would you take it?
Good question. Anyone else?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good question, but I also think that and this was said earlier, but maybe it wasn't said like bluntly, is you have to know what you have, right? So Darren alluded to this, Josh alluded to this. If you're going to start anywhere, you need to take an inventory, right? Which means you need to do an assessment. You need to actually look at where is my risk at? And then you can then formulate a game plan, right? In saying, okay, if I have these things, and a lot of businesses, right, whether this is coming from Andy's side and the cyber insurance side, and we've seen businesses now that have to go get cyber insurance to even do business with other entities, small government, municipalities, all these things are starting to enforce that. Then we're seeing other things like the FTC safeguards rule, which impacts a lot more businesses than people think. Because if your business collects any kind of non-public PII, you then fall underneath this FTC safeguards rule, which means if you offer financing to buy this piece of equipment and you are offering someone to fill out the application to get that financing, you now fall underneath that. And you probably need to be aware of those things, and that's part of your risk assessment. Then you can formulate a game plan to actually start putting controls in place to reduce risk, which companies like Yukon will help guide you. Hey, put these 6 or 7 critical controls in place. You reduce your insurance premium by 30 to 40%, which would usually offset the cost of those controls in there. But you can't secure what you don't know you don't have.
Right. And
I'll
tell you, go ahead.
Before you get there, Andy, just one quick thing to think about we haven't really talked about. I don't know if anyone's thinking about. In addition to those costs, I'm an expert witness on 18 data breach cases because companies have lost PII and PHI from the individuals who had their information stored there. And law firms all over the country are looking for these type of data breaches to go after the entity that lost that particular piece of information. And these cases are settling. They're not even going to court. They're settling because the organization realized it's easier to settle, like MGM, $45 million settlement.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to add to what you're correct, Darren. And you know, what I was going to add to what he said, the cost of admission is going up, you know. So what I would say to a business owner that doesn't want to take, you know, is trying to decide whether or not to take it seriously is like, do you want to limit your revenue opportunities? Do you want to handicap yourself to make money in the future? If you do, don't take cyber insurance or cybersecurity seriously, because here's what's happening in the market, right? We're all more interconnected than we've ever been, and that's only increasing, right? Everybody has third-party risk. Everybody's tied into third-party entities in their own way, right? What's starting to happen within those third-party relationships is people are waking up to their vendor risk, right? So they're starting to say, hey, if you're going to work with us, if you're going to, you know, logistics work with us, supply chain work with whatever it may be, right? Not only do we need you to meet a certain level of basic cybersecurity or cyber hygiene, we also need you to carry X amount in insurance as well, right? So if you don't have those things coming in the gate, right, you don't get to play ball. Heath knew that I was going to use a baseball or a kid's example. You know, I mean, 30 years ago, if you wanted to go watch a ball game, all you had to do was hand somebody a couple bucks and go in and watch the game. Now you got to sign a waiver. You got to pay the team fee up front. You got to, you know, the cost of admission's increasing, right? And if you're a small business and you're not taking cybersecurity and cyber insurance seriously, you're going to limit revenue opportunities.
Well, I'm sure Darren and Josh can speak to this, but you know, we mentioned Target. What never gets mentioned was that it was actually their HVAC contractor that was the weak link to get them into there. So it was a supply chain attack for that big thing, and it was the small business. And Andy, as you just mentioned, if you're a small business, even an HVAC contractor, and you're connected to the internet and you're servicing big box stores like Target, they are going to require you to start to put these things in place.
That's it. And we didn't see that was not happening 5 years ago. When I first started running around, you know, the South with CISA, and we were talking about this, you know, shout out to Mark Kirby. He's our regional director down here. He stood up on a stage in 2021 and said, guys, if I'm looking into my crystal ball, I would bet sometime around 25, 26 that we're going to start seeing government and third-party entities require a baseline of cybersecurity and cyber insurance out of their vendor partners. And it's not across the board, but we're definitely seeing it a larger clip than we were 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, and to that point, I would look at any business and go, how long can you operate on a 20% reduction of your revenue?
Yep.
That is your first question I'll ask you. And then 2,
Perfect.
what happens to you when when your biggest client doesn't renew with you because you don't meet their minimum security requirements, because they're now being forced to have higher security controls, and they're looking at you saying, give me, this 100-page security information guide document, and I want to see what your cybersecurity insurance policy is, and that's not high enough for the level of risk that we want. What's going to happen to your business when you lose your top 1, 2, or 5 clients?
And I think that was starting to address this question that's on the screen from a viewer right now. And Josh, if you just want to reread that, or Darren, and then kind of like summarize you covered a lot of those parts.
Really quickly read through it. So this is pertinent to this conversation. A LinkedIn user asking, what can SMBs who are in the supply chain or in critical infrastructure business for defense, healthcare, finance, et cetera, what can they do to show that they are cyber risk resilient and offer proof of cyber insurance so that they get those contracts, they can get on the FedRAMP schedule, et cetera?
Oh, is that for me?
It's for anybody.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Fire away, man.
You have to, get a risk assessment. At least show, we've done. You can get to ISO 27001, whatever. Get some kind of certification. But the problem is, you got to keep maintaining it. You can't just get certification and say, hey, we're good. Woo, yay for us. You have to continue it down the road. It's not a one-time thing. It's something you got to continue to do. Again, this is not happening here, but there's a bill coming out in the UK that if you're part of critical national infrastructure, a data center, an MSP, if you have some kind of cyber incident, you have 72 hours to report it. And if you haven't resolved the issue in 72 hours, you're fined $100,000 a day. Mm-hmm. That doesn't exist here in the US, but it's not to say that that has success, that it may not, it's something that someone would think about. And I fear, obviously, politicians doing the cybers, because they don't do it very well, but it's possible. But in CMMC, perfect example. CMMC is now, as mentioned earlier, is a requirement. If you're in the defense space, you've got to get certified.
Yeah. And let's say, let's say if you don't fall under CMMC or HIPAA or FTC, but you touch those entities or those industries as a third party, there are third party folks out there that can put their stamp on your business. The first one that comes to mind is Ryan Ettridge and his crew over at CyberCert, right? Like, they have a silver, gold, platinum stamp that you can run your business through. Maybe you're not under a compliance regulation, but you can go out and position yourself to those vendors as, hey, we've gone through this independent audit, right? This third party has said that we're up to snuff, and here's our homework, right? So there are things that small businesses can do to kind of prove their mettle out in the, in the open market.
And beyond that, there are free tools out there, particularly provided by CISA, that will help you do that on your own or help you get the right people. So it doesn't even have to cost you a lot of money to pull in a third party to do it. The tools are there. You just have to go and use them.
Yep.
Everyone's talked about great examples for, having a strong cybersecurity posture, the right levels of insurance, can help boost a bottom line, not just be a defense mechanism. Can you cite some examples where strong leadership in this space has boosted a company's bottom line? If you can't name the companies by name, I understand, but if there are examples, it'd be great to hear.
Well, I can't name any names, but I know, like, we've seen a lot of growth with some certain industries, particularly, like, I'll name an industry, the automotive dealership space, which you don't really think falls underneath, like, why would they need to be, so cyber ready? But if you actually think about it, auto dealers don't necessarily just sell cars; they sell loans. That's where they make most of their margin, and they do collect a lot of non-public PII. And what we've seen is the ones that are taking that seriously, and as mentioned here, and then actually use that as a way to build trust with their customers, right? And it will return there. But we've also actually seen things that we've helped some dealerships do improve operational efficiencies. The dealers in certain departments have a high turnover of employees, right? And there was a lot of previously sharing passwords or logins to different systems because they're just constantly turning over. They don't want to recreate new identities and all those things. And so if you can fix that, you reduce that, create operational efficiency, and build brand trust in doing those things. So we've seen a lot of wins in automotive dealerships that are taking it seriously.
Was that before or after the CDK Global breach of last year?
So we had some dealerships that actually started before the CDK incident, and then I would say that the CDK incident actually slowed it down a little bit because it took a lot of dealers offline and were distracted. And again, this goes back to my earlier statement. Still today, we see a lot of dealerships that think that it was CDK's responsibility and not their own to actually take ownership of it. And we're trying to still help those dealerships say, you need to own responsibility for your side of the field, right?
Seems like an unpopular opinion.
Yes,
Especially from an insurance standpoint, that event shone a light into a dark corner of dealerships that they didn't know. They thought they were covered for business income. Well, guess what? That's not your breach. That's CDK Global's breach. That's dependent business interruption. And I hate to tell you guys, but that's not covered on a whole lot of base form cyber policies, right? So like CDK Global itself was like a major, like it was almost like a monolithic time to grow up, in the FTC safeguard rules had said, hey, you need to do this. And everybody's like, damn government, we'll wait, whatever, and then CDK Global happened. And they went, oh, I guess we do. Right. So, I mean, you hate that folks have to go through that, but it did force some maturity there.
It seems like there's always about one incident that kind of wakes everyone up and jolts them into action.
You would think, but there's still a lot of people stubborn out there.
Totally. Yeah, no, it's like, well, it hasn't hit my business yet. So I understand it may not be a top priority, but we're talking a lot today, and we've got another question for the group. And I think we've addressed it a little bit, but we want to shift the idea of cybersecurity and physical security from being thought of as just a cost center to a business enabler. And you've touched upon some great examples today. If there's more to share, maybe we can do it, asynchronously afterwards in the comment section, or maybe you can address it now. But I want to move us into the lightning round, as I like to call it, which is that each of you get 30 seconds for like summary thoughts, or maybe to touch upon anything that we haven't today that you feel is important to address. And maybe let's start with you, Darren.
So first thing I would say from the question about the cost center, go see Josh Copeland's unpopular opinion about that. Best thing I've read on it ever. So that's part of my 30 seconds I want to use. The other thing is know who's you got to, before you can assess your risk, you have to understand the threats targeting you. So have someone come and help you. Here's, based on your business model, this is where the attacks are coming from. These are the things you need to think about, because it may be more than just criminals and script kiddies. It may be nation state attackers.
Excellent. Andy, how about you?
Yeah, my non-insurance bias quote or comment is going to be go if you don't have an IR plan and you hadn't done a pen test, go do it today, right? Like those are things that we see a lot of folks missing, right? And then
so Andy, for those that may not know, what does IR stand for?
Yeah, incident response plan, right? Like having an idea, the old Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? Like go get a plan for what you do after you get punched in the mouth, right? And then a penetration test to Darren, what he was speaking about, like find out where your cracks are. And then on the insurance side of things, what I would say is guys, get with somebody that can quantify your risk. Every report we see that's coming out says losses are here, average insurance is here, right? And people aren't being made whole by their claims, right? And we're seeing that through multiple reports. Address your cybersecurity, quantify your risk, get with somebody who knows how to transfer risk appropriately.
Josh, anything popular, unpopular to say?
So I'll give you my two unpopular ones because they both cost a lot of money. One, if the first time that you talk to your lawyers after you had a breach, you have failed miserably. They should be integrated into your writing of your incident response plan to make sure that you're doing it the right way. And, Darren, cover your ears because I'm going to say something you probably won't like as an FBI agent. Bring them in early so you're covered under attorney-client privilege. So you reduce your discoverable evidence that might be able to come out. And the second one is get involved in the ISAC for your community, the Information Sharing and Analysis Center. Pretty much every type of business has an ISAC built around it, whether you're retail and hospitality, whether you're state and local government, whether you're automotive. There is an ISAC for you that specializes in providing information that is targeted to your type of business and what you're doing, and largely will do it for a extremely reasonable price compared to pulling in an external firm.
Great. Heath, bring us home. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so obviously I support all of the statements that were made. Like, you got to start with assessments, you got to put plans in place, and then once you get that done, biasly, I'm going to say the first control to put in place is strong multi-factor authentication, particularly one that's phishing resistant MFA. If you're curious about how to do that, ask me how, and we'll help.
Sounds great. All right, gentlemen, security isn't just IT's problem. We've talked about that. ROI and revenue depend on confronting cyber risk, improving trust, and making security part of your business strategy. All right, that's all the time we have for today. As a reminder for the audience, this show is recorded and will be available on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So if you've enjoyed the show, we do appreciate the likes and the shares. Thanks to our panel. You guys have been great. And you've helped us tame the elephant for now. Appreciate the conversation. I'm sure there's a lot more to say, so please reach out to any of us anytime you'd like, and let's keep the conversation going. To the audience, thanks for being here. We know you have choices of where to fly and where to be at this time of day, and we're glad you were here, whether it was morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Okay, thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the next Ready, Set, Cyber.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.